In the beginning, there was chess. Then God said, "Let there be 5D chess with multiverse time travel." And there was 5D chess with multiverse time travel. God, in this instance, is Connor Peterson, aka Thunkspace, who in 2020 figured out how to add time travel to chess in a way that actually works. It's an actual game. You can play it. It's on Steam. The premise is that the rules of 2D chess are generalized to 4D, hence the name, 5D chess. Pieces can travel back in time, spawning new timelines that in turn host moves from their pieces, and so on. Now, the game made a fair splash when it was released, and goes semi-viral every now and again when someone notices one of its top Steam tags is psychological horror, or when a YouTuber makes a video about it where the thumbnail says, "Help, my brain hurts," or something. One such YouTuber was me. I enjoyed the game enough to make a semi-viral video about it, and I still enjoy it. It's just insanely inventive, and I love that it kind of, sort of works as a real game. Mostly. But let's leave that behind and talk about another beginning for a moment. In that other beginning, there was diplomacy. That other beginning was 1959, when law student Alan Calhammer invented a board game about World War I. In diplomacy, each player controls one of the great powers of Europe and must strategize and scheme their way to victory over their opponents. I also made a video about diplomacy that did pretty well, and for the rest of this video, I'll assume you know the rules of base diplomacy, so maybe go watch that first if you're new to it. If you stubbornly refuse to, though, the way I normally describe diplomacy is risk, but everyone takes their turn at the same time. Or sometimes, I like to think of it as 7-player chess. Now, sometime after I'd made videos on 5D chess and diplomacy, someone left a comment on one of them that said, "Now do 5D diplomacy with multiverse time travel." And I thought, yeah, right, as if there's any way that could even work. You can't just smush 2 games together and expect to have a new game. That would be madness. But maybe I was mad, because the brainworm had taken hold. You start thinking about 5D diplomacy, and you skirt the boundaries between sanity and madness, and you realise you can smush these particular games together, and then you can't stop, and all of a sudden you've made a prototype. An extremely simplified and truly buggy prototype, yes, but it showed the world it could be done. And, like a good mathematician, having proven the concept, I was for a while content to leave the rest as an exercise to the viewer. The comments, though, kept coming in. "This would be amazing if it was real. Can't wait for this to be a real game. If this is ever a real game, Veilfisk should play this. 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 Veilfisk should play this," and so on, and you get the picture. Anyway, that was 2021. Today, 3 years later, I'm here to show you that the impossible things are in fact possible. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Let them be big and beautiful. Let them be 5D diplomacy with multiverse time travel, 100% guarantee no Bamboozle edition. If you've been wondering why I've made no videos lately, here you go. This project has accidentally sucked up most of my free time for the last 3 months, and for context, the prototype took about 3 days. So it's been a journey. What actually is it? Let's start off there. Well, it's an application with 3 components: a SQL database, an ASP.NET server, and a front end built in React. All of the code is available on GitHub and linked below. What it's not, at least not yet, is an application that's hosted anywhere. You can run it locally and have LAN parties, or maybe play a multiplayer game over the wider internet if you're willing to mess with port forwarding on your router, which, to be honest, I'm completely ignorant about. But you will still have to run through the setup instructions yourself, and you can't go to like a website to play it. It's not that I don't know how to do that, by the way. It's that I don't know how to do it in a way that won't bankrupt me if 100,000 people decide they want to play it at once. Sorry. So yeah, for now, if you want to play, see the setup instructions on GitHub. I may make a setup guide video at some point too, but yeah, not entirely sure. Now, I should mention before we start that I've had help from quite a few people on this. Firstly, thanks to CaptainMeme from the channel DiploStrats for working through the diplomacy adjudication algorithm with me. You may be surprised to learn that making something 5D is, well, it's difficult, but it's not really that bad. But programming a diplomacy adjudicator is nigh on impossible. Convoy paradoxes. So many convoy paradoxes. But CaptainMeme's diplomacy expertise definitely helped here, and I think we're both completely indebted to Lucas Krushvik, who really defined the modern way that diplomacy adjudicators work, with the diplomacy adjudicator test cases. All of those are present as unit tests to prove it works, by the way, so that's nice. Also a big help was Iggy the Fool, who I discovered was creating his own implementation independently after seeing my prototype. He has been great with testing, and we've kind of commandeered his Discord server to be the 5D diplomacy hub. So go and join that if you want to discuss the game. We actually had the first 7-player playtest in this server on Sunday, and it was massive amounts of fun until it crashed. Fingers crossed, I've fixed the crash. Who knows? Who knows if there are others? I'd also like to thank Jack Ulabilis, who was also working on an independent 5D diplomacy. He even developed the multiversal diplomacy adjudicator test cases, which I also copied and added as unit tests. And finally, this charming piece of artwork here comes from Lady Razor, who is the resident artist for the Diplomats, who are kind of a diplomacy personality collective. Right, I think that is all the preamble covered. So I think what we all want to do right now is actually start a game of 5D diplomacy. So I guess, yeah, for context, I'm going to be playing a sandbox. You can play this with multiple players. As I said, they'll have to be running locally or some extension of that. And with that, you can use the join game option. But for now, I am just going to go with new game and choose sandbox. Now, the adjacencies option here, I will explain later what that means. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go with loose adjacencies for this game, and I shall create a game of 5D diplomacy. There we are. And it's just a normal diplomacy board. What's weird about that? And actually, while we're here, right, fun fact about 5D chess, not all valid chess games are valid 5D chess games. And you may think, how is that possible? Because the set of available moves in a chess game is surely just a strict subset of the set of available moves in a 5D chess game. And that is true up until the final turn, where, because there are more moves available to you, it is possible for a player to escape checkmate, even if in regular chess they may have actually had nowhere to go. But in 5D diplomacy, every valid diplomacy game, I believe, is a valid 5D diplomacy game. So if you want to join together with some friends and create a pact that none of you travel back in time, then you can just use this to play diplomacy. I don't want to pat myself on the back too much here, but I think it's actually quite a nice interface for entering diplomacy orders. So what we have a world, we can zoom, we can pan around, as again, currently only one board. And we have a list of all of the supply centers owned by each player. So I can go through and open those. There's the game ID, which you'll have to copy and send to people if you're playing with them. There's the adjacency strictness setting. And then there's some buttons down here for entering orders. And they also have hotkeys associated with them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and an escape to exit out of that, which is quite nice. So, if you played diplomacy before, the first turn, 5D diplomacy is just diplomacy, so I'm just going to enter some pretty standard openings. So do that, and you'll notice this list along the right here is filling up with all of the orders you've added. So that's quite nice. To do more orders. Let's say that there's a bounce in Galicia, because why not? Go there, there, there. There we go. There's some relatively standard openings, and you can see in the order list down here, it actually highlights the order as you hover over, which I found quite helpful in just working with this thing. And also, if you click on any of them, it actually zooms the world to go and see them, which is again quite nice. And you can also collapse and expand the list of orders, because this list of orders is going to get a lot bigger, both vertically and horizontally as the game goes on. So I've entered all of the orders. All of those were just basic moves. So if you want to enter hold, you can either be in hold mode or you can be in move mode and then go, double click on it. That counts as a hold. If you want to enter support, you select support, go blah to blah. There we are. We've got a support going there. Of course, that's an invalid move because it's a support in land for a fleet. But yeah, one thing to mention, this 5D diplomacy does not have any input validation. It has a tiny bit, but not really to do with the main phase turns. And the reason for that is then that the front end, the client, would have to know all of the possible places that units could go, which is really the responsibility of the adjudication algorithm. So yeah, you can just enter completely invalid orders, and then in the resolution phase, they will turn out to have been failures. But it's up to you. If you want to be rogue, you can do that. And then finally, of course, you can do a convoy. So I could convoy that one to there. Again, another invalid move. But for now, I'm just going to go with that. And I will press submit. And all of a sudden, it's no longer normal diplomacy anymore. So the prototype, right, that was just 3 regions in a triangle. It was the simplest non-trivial diplomacy board. This is a full diplomacy board that moves forward in a similar way. So all of these orders are now locked in, and we can make new orders on the new board. And of course, these orders, they could just be normal, regular diplomacy orders. You could just play a normal diplomacy game. What you could also do, if I select one of them, let's say Spain, is go back in time, and you'll notice that once you've selected a unit on an active board like this one, you can then go back in time and all of the regions on previous boards become selectable. So let's say that Spain goes to Portugal in the past. And now I should mention here that this is where the adjacencies setting comes in. So I've currently got it set to, well, I'll explain strict adjacencies first. So if you've chosen strict adjacencies mode, this unit in Spain here, it could obviously move anywhere it's adjacent to on its own board. But in terms of time travel and timeline traveling, it could only move to Spain on adjacent boards. So it could move to Spain here. It could, if there was a board above it, it could move to Spain on that board. A board below it, it could move to Spain on that board. But yeah, any other move would count as invalid, as if you were trying to like move this unit 2 spaces in a regular diplomacy game. With loose adjacencies, all of those moves are still valid, plus moves to any regions on those boards that are adjacent to Spain. So that is why going to Portugal should work for this one. And I guess people are waiting to see what happens, but I'll just enter some more orders here. Let's go with that. Let's say support into Greece. Let's say there's a convoy over to Tunis. Some more pretty standard things. Another bounce, because why not? And yeah, I don't need to fill out all of the orders. That's your job when you come to play this. So now I'm going to submit. And look what's happened. Yeah. This is looking pretty much like 5D chess now, isn't it? So I should clarify, there is a slight change to the way that time travel and resolution of time travel works in this compared to the prototype. So in the prototype, if you moved back in time to a space where there was a bounce, kind of the bounce wasn't counted. Like you could move, that counted as an empty space that you could move to. I realized that was perhaps a bit backwards from the way diplomacy is supposed to work. So the rule of thumb now is that every time you submit orders, given the state of the world, the entire world is a single huge diplomacy board, and all of the orders resolve as if, it was just a single turn. But obviously, the orders that are already existing in the past, they can't be changed because those units did those things in the past. Otherwise, how could they ended up where they are? I can't actually show it on this turn because I've just split the timeline off and it's got nowhere it can travel back to. And this is a winter board that can't travel anywhere, but we'll come to that. But if I was to take one of these units and bounce with a unit that was on this board, as in, say, instead of Berlin moving to Kiel, well, I had Berlin moving to Kiel, and then, say, Kiel moved back in time to bounce that, then this would no longer be a successful move, and the resolution of that board would be different to the resolution that generated this board. And therefore, it would split off a new timeline. So every time that a board has a resolution that is different to any of its previous resolutions, you split off a new timeline. I should also note, so I did have a bit of an existential crisis with the prototype when I came to figuring out where the timeline should go. And again, in the intervening time, I've kind of realized that that was backwards, because in 5D chess, timelines appear above and below kind of the central prime timeline. And that's because a turn in chess belongs to a single player. So you had, I can't remember which one around, but it was probably white turns appearing above the prime timeline and black turns appearing below. In Diplomacy, there is no concept of ownership of a turn. Everyone reveals their orders at the same time. That's kind of the core principle of Diplomacy. So if more than one person were to have traveled back in time here, those orders are just added to the pool of orders to resolve. And I think it's quite neat. It does mean that you just have to have a single direction of timelines expanding forward. So that's why this timeline appeared below. And it's not possible to have timelines appearing above this prime timeline now. But what will happen is gradually more and more timelines will appear as you go further into the game and more people jump into other boards. And it will go down, down, and down in a kind of canonical order, where if there's multiple boards that have new resolutions on the same turn, then the timelines that come out of those will be allocated based on how far along in time they are, and so on. So I think that covers the main differences with the original conception of time travel in the prototype. I guess, yeah, one thing I can do here. So this now counts as a pass board. So this board could, units from this board can now move to it. So what can I do with this? Let's say Bulgaria wants to move to Greece, which they can do, because with loose adjacencies, that is adjacent to Bulgaria, one timeline over. And let's say fleet in Ionian supports that move. So let's do that. So that is one board that will resolve in this turn. Another board is this one, where there are builds. So the adjustment rules are limited to particular timelines. So if you capture more territories in one timeline and lose the same number of territories in another timeline, they don't cancel out. You actually have to build, well, you don't have to build, but you can build in one timeline and you have to disband in the other. It's kind of, the adjustment counts as a turn in the same way that any of these moves here counts as a turn. So what have we got? We've got England captured Norway, so they get builds. I can build things for here. That's built for Russia. Built for Turkey. Austria gets 2, because apparently they're doing well here. Italy, Germany. And now France. So France hasn't actually captured anything new, right? The reason they have a build available is because one of their units has travelled back in time. So this is now a board with more units than it can support, for France at least. So France gets a build in this timeline, but the trade-off is that in this timeline, unless they can use that new unit to capture a new centre, they will almost certainly have to disband it in the next turn. So it is kind of a trade-off. I think it works decently well. There were some questions about other potential ways of adjudicating, like ways of adjusting, like adjusting across the entire world at once. But I quite like this way. I think, you could send all of your units back in time to go and do something, really crazy in the past. But then you need to make sure that that actually succeeds for all of those units to survive. Otherwise, once it gets to the next winter turn, they're gonna be gone. And I think that might be a good way to prevent timeline spam. So we'll see timeline spamming coming in a moment. But anyway, where were we? So we've got these 2 orders going back in time there, and we've got a few builds happening on that board. So if I submit now, what we've got with this board continued. So winter boards are largely exempt from the idea of time travel. You can't move to them, you can't move from them. They just kind of happen in between these fall and spring boards. So that means that these 2 boards here, the fall 1901 and spring 02, they count as adjacent. So when you're moving, there's nothing in between them. This board has progressed again. Yeah, in the same way. It's just gone to where the units were. There's slightly different number of units that are available to the previous one. And then this board has come about because this support from a different timeline has gone into the past of the first timeline and bounced with the move here. And that has changed the resolution of that board, of that set of orders, and therefore that board. And so the arrangement of units and centers are different. And so we have a new timeline split off. I mean, it makes sense, actually. I think it makes quite a bit of good sense. And it's definitely in keeping with the spirit of diplomacy, in my opinion. But yeah, it can be difficult to understand what you need to do about it. So yeah, what else can I show off here? This does demonstrate an interesting interpretation of the self-consistency principle. I wonder if I can make something that does that. Let's do that. Let's send Sevastopol and Ankara back in time to bounce with themselves. And what's going to happen here, obviously I put no orders in for these two boards, so nothing's going to happen here, and all the rest of these orders will hold. But these two, so they bounced with themselves. That means that there is no new timeline split off because the position of the units after the resolution of the orders on this board is the same as it was before. So this still only has the one new timeline splitting off. And these units, of course, have not moved anywhere. So I think, yeah, you can do time travel things with this game. Another time travel thing, it kind of turns out that built into the rules of diplomacy, when extended to 5D, is a solution to the grandfather paradox. Would you believe it? So I can take Moscow and go back in time there. Sorry, let's go back in time with Sevastopol and support it with Moscow. So the rule of diplomacy is that you dislodge a unit if you have a strength greater than its strength and all of its supports, counting all of your supports as well, except when you are attacking yourself. So what's going to happen here is these are actually invalid orders. So according to the rules of diplomacy, it is impossible to kill your past self, which I just find very satisfying as a way to do time travel things in diplomacy. Yeah, the world is getting pretty big now, and I haven't even been making moves on any of the timelines, apart from like here and there to demonstrate things. I guess retreats are a big one. So retreats don't count as an extra turn in this, or an extra board in this version. So I will demonstrate that if where can I dislodge something easily? Yeah, I'll just maneuver some into a position where they can do that. Yeah, there's no builds on this one, so let's just progress that timeline. And let's maneuver some units. Let's say we want to go after Norway together as Germany and Russia. So let's do that. And then you go in there, you support in. And there is no support for England from the North Sea in this instance. So what happens here, all of the boards freeze, none of them, well, all of the orders are shown with their resolution. So if I'd added orders to these boards, it would have told you whether they'd succeeded or failed. But the timeline has not moved onwards. You notice I can't actually click on any of them. What I have to do first is take all of the retreats at once and move, provide a retreat movement for them. And then all of the timelines actually progress. And yeah, there's a slightly different color to indicate that. And then we move into the next turn with that retreat having happened. So retreats, they're kind of a layer on top of a main phase board. They're not a separate thing. So that's, yeah, something to clarify and bear in mind. I feel like I want to leave exploring the possibilities of what you can do with the units kind of up to you. But yeah, there are a few more things to mention. The victory condition is something important. So in the prototype video, I said that I didn't really have an idea of what the victory condition was. I believe I said that. I definitely didn't really have an idea, whatever I said. And I am quite a believer in that the rules of 5D diplomacy should be a true generalization of the rules of main diplomacy. So that's why units can only ever move one space at a time. So yeah, North Sea can move to North Sea in the board before, but it can't move here because in diplomacy, a unit can only ever move one space at a time. And I thought, well, the victory condition for 5D diplomacy should surely, if restricted to a single timeline, it should surely be the victory condition for normal diplomacy. And there are a few ways of doing that. So perhaps the obvious one is to say you need to control half of the supply centers in all of the active boards. That's all of the boards at the end of a timeline. But then I thought through that a bit, and I thought it through with the people I was speaking about earlier, and we realized that that probably is not a particularly realistic victory condition, and it's also perhaps doesn't take advantage of time travel in the way it should do. So the alternative victory condition, and I have to thank CaptainMeme for suggesting this, because I really like it, is that to win, you need to control 18 unique supply centers across all active timelines. And by unique, that means unique by the name of the supply center. So I guess we can show it now. Say Russia, right? They currently control Moscow in 3 different timelines. But if I look at the list of supply centers they control, there's only one Moscow. That only counts towards their total once. They control Sweden in one timeline, 2 timelines even, and not the other. So that gets it there. But it counts for exactly the same as Moscow in terms of how many centers they need for victory. And yeah, I think that this approach incentivizes time travel a lot more. It incentivizes varying your strategy on different timelines. So perhaps in one timeline, you would go for one part of the board, and in another timeline, you go for another, just to try and get to 18, a coverage of 18 as soon as you can. It is, however, possible, although unlikely, for 2 people or more to reach 18 supply centers in the same turn. If that happens, the victory condition is then it's just the first person to get an outright majority, or the outright highest amount. So you keep playing until someone gets a number of supply centers that is strictly higher than everyone else and also higher than 18, if that makes sense. So I don't think I'm going to really be able to show that, because it might take a while of inputting orders, and you don't really want to watch me just put orders in for the rest of the video. I think I've really demonstrated all of the core concepts here. If there's anything that I've not demonstrated, then leave questions in the comments, or you can go to the Discord server, as I mentioned, the 5D Diplomacy Discord server, where, yeah, hopefully people will be discussing the game and asking questions about it. I think that there's one last thing I would like to show, actually. I've left things in a position to do this, so that's good. So actually, there's 2 things, right? I forgot another one. So the first one, in 5D chess, there is a mechanic where the number of timelines that are spawned is limited. And that is only possible because, as I said earlier, the number of timelines is linked, or a particular timeline is linked to a particular player. So I believe, it's been a while, but I believe the condition is you can only ever have one more timeline than the other player. So if you spawn a new timeline yourself, then you have to wait for your opponent to spawn one before that timeline actually becomes usable. Because diplomacy turns don't belong to anyone, they just belong to everyone, that isn't really applicable to this game. And so it does mean that currently, in this version of 5D Diplomacy, there is no limit to the number of timelines that can be created. I suspect, having played one proper playtest of this, that the timelines are likely to grow out of control extremely fast. I mean, the performance isn't actually too bad. The server, the adjudicator, is fine. The front end, as you can probably tell, is chugging a bit when you get zoom out and show a lot of timelines at once. But if you zoom in, then it's perfectly fine. But I think the mental capacity of dealing with that many timelines may become a bit of an issue. So it's still an outstanding question, really, of whether there is some sensible mechanic that can be added to limit the number of timelines that are created. And again, I'm quite a believer in having whatever that mechanic be just a natural extension of diplomacy, rather than some arbitrary addition to it. And I personally can't really think of anything that fits both of those criteria. So yeah, for now, you just have to deal with lots of timelines. And the other thing I wanted to mention, similarly in the spirit of extending diplomacy, is that in 5D chess, so there's a very famous move in 5D chess, partially made famous by me, called the Jurassic Rook, where a rook whose movement is unbounded in any axis goes all the way back to the beginning of the game and spawns a new timeline from there. Similar moves, they're not really possible in diplomacy, right? Because according to the rules of diplomacy, every unit can only move one space per turn, with one exception. And I'm about to show you that exception. So you may have noticed whenever I select support or convoy, a new board appears over here. And I call this the ghost board. And what this lets you do is you can enter any arbitrary location in the multiverse in this board. So I could type, let's say I want to go from the year timeline 2000 or the year 2000, if the game goes on that long. Let's hope it doesn't. But for now, I'm just going to go full fall. So that's now timeline 2 fall 1904. And I'm going to convoy from Edinburgh to Norway in this turn. And you may be thinking, what's going on here, right? What is going on here? Because I'm going to submit this now. And when I submit this move, but it's invalid. Of course it's invalid, right? It's trying to convoy a unit that doesn't exist. Yet. So, what do we have here? So that's just a winter board. I can skip past that. Instead, let's take this fleet and let's do exactly the same move. So this is, what was that one? I just messed this up. No, it should be full 04. I don't know why it's all the way over there, to be honest. That's a bug. There may still be bugs in this. But I can take Edinburgh and go to Norway again. And you see what's happening here. So if I submit that one, now, when I get to this board, all of a sudden, there is a unit in the position that the convoy is expecting. And what I'm going to do is send that unit all the way back in time, and you'll notice it's going back more than one board at a time. So what happens here? Well, if I submit it, then it actually moves, splits off a new timeline. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Jurassic Convoy. And that may be the greatest achievement of my life. Oh dear. Right. I think I'm just about ready to finish this. Yeah, as I said, the code is in the description. You can run it locally. If you can work out how to play it with other people, then you can do that. Otherwise, there may be a setup guide in the future. Join the Discord if you have questions about it or want to participate in playtests. I think there are a few more coming up that Iggy the Fool is organising. And I think I'm going to leave you with one phrase, and then we'll stop. So thank you all for watching, and please enjoy 5D diplomacy with multiverse time travel. And I think all of us can agree that Veilfisk should play this.